imagine you're standing at the very edge of this, like, massive, dark, bottomless canyon.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, and you cup your hands around your mouth and you shout this deeply personal question into the void. Like you yell, what is the point of all this? What is the meaning of my life?
Yeah, it's a heavy question to be yelling into a canyon.
It really is. And you stand there, right, expecting this booming, wise voice to answer back from the depths. But all you get is the cold, indifferent echo of your own voice.
It's total silence from the universe.
Exactly. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, you, the listener, are going to join us as we explore what is honestly, arguably, the ultimate question of human existence.
The big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is life actually worth living?
I mean, it doesn't get much heavier than that. It is the heaviest question we can possibly ask.
Truly.
And to tackle it today, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources. We're anchoring this whole conversation in Albert Camus's legendary 1942 philosophical essay, The Myth of Sisyphus.
Such a classic.
It is. But to help unpack some of the denser concepts, because it does get dense, we're also drawing from a really comprehensive Litchard's study guide.
Those are always lifesavers.
Oh, absolutely. And we also have this brilliant article from The Collector by Simon Leah. It's titled, Why Should We Imagine Sisyphus Happy?
Which is a huge question in itself. But before we get into like the heavy philosophical lifting, let's quickly ground ourselves in who Albert Camus actually was.
Good idea.
Yeah, pulling from that Litchard's guide, because this guy wasn't some, academic sitting in a comfortable ivory tower just spinning abstract theories.
None at all. His life was intense.
Super intense. He was born in Algeria, lost his father in World War I when he was literally just a baby, and was raised in total poverty by his mother.
Right, and he was also a pretty incredible athlete, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a high-skilled soccer goalie, but he lost his entire athletic career when he contracted tuberculosis.
That is just brutal.
And the real kicker, the thing that blows my mind, is he wrote The Myth of Sisyphus while he was actively serving in the French resistance during World War II.
See, I think that context changes how you read the entire essay. I mean, he was surrounded by the collapse of Europe, the daily horrors of war, and just this profound, immediate fragility of human life.
He was living it.
Exactly. He wasn't dealing with logic puzzles for some university debate. He was dealing with literal existential survival in a world that, seemed entirely broken.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Camus starts his essay with a claim that is honestly just incredibly jarring.
He really does just drop a bomb right on page 1.
He does. He says there's only one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is whether life is or is not worth living. That amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. And everything else, like whether the universe has 3 dimensions or, I don't know, what the nature of consciousness is, that's all just a game.
It's just trivia compared to the main event.
Right. So how does he justify opening with such a massive claim?
Well, to justify it, he actually points to history. He notes that Galileo discovered this profound scientific truth, right, that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Huge deal.
Right. But the moment that truth endangered his life with the Inquisition, Galileo just abjured it. He took it all back.
Wow. Just never mind, I was wrong.
Exactly. And Camus argues that, in a practical sense, Galileo actually did the right thing, because that scientific truth, as important as it was, wasn't worth dying for.
That makes sense.
But then he points out that people do die every single day because they judge that life itself isn't worth living.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So therefore, finding a reason to live, or, determining if a reason even exists at all, that is the most urgent question humanity faces.
Wow, that frames it so perfectly. But to follow his path to an answer, I think we have to really understand what Camus means by the absurd.
We definitely do. It's the core of everything he's saying.
Because when we hear that word, absurd in everyday conversation, we usually think of something silly, like a ridiculous comedy movie or some bizarre coincidence.
Right, like a clown on a unicycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But his definition is something much, much deeper.
It is.
Yeah.
For Camus, the absurd is a fundamental divorce. It's not a property of the universe alone. Like, the universe isn't absurd in itself. It's just irrational and silent.
It just is what it is.
Right. And the absurd isn't a property of humanity alone either. The absurd is the intense, unavoidable friction between two very specific things.
Okay, what are they?
On one side, you have the human being's desperate, completely hardwired desire for meaning, unity, and clarity.
We want things to make sense.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have the universe's cold, unreasonable silence. So the absurd is born entirely in that specific confrontation between the two.
That is exactly like that canyon metaphor from the beginning.
Oh yeah, it totally is.
It's like shouting a deeply personal question into this massive dark cavern, expecting some wise answer, but all you get is the cold echo of your voice. The cavern isn't, like, evil for not answering.
No, it's just a rock.
It's just a rock, but you are so desperate for an answer. So that complete mismatch between what we need and what the world actually offers, that is the absurd.
You nailed it. That's exactly it.
But hold on, if the universe gives us absolutely nothing, why do we keep going at all? I mean, why doesn't he just suggest we give up immediately?
Well, Camus addresses that head on, actually. He notes that we get into the habit of living long before we acquire the habit of thinking.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. The physical body naturally shrinks from annihilation. We just, go through the motions of life. But eventually, for the conscious person, an awakening happens.
Like a glitch in the matrix.
Kind of, yeah. The text vividly describes the mechanical nature of modern life. It's like you rise, you take the streetcar, you spend 4 hours in the office or the factory, you eat a meal, you sleep.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all to the exact same rhythm.
The ultimate grind. It just becomes this automatic loop that we're all stuck in.
And most of the time, we follow that path easily without asking any questions at all. But one day, as Camus puts it, the stage sets collapse.
The stage sets collapse. I love that phrase.
It's so evocative. The why suddenly arises. Weariness awakens consciousness. And I actually ask you, the listener tuning in right now, what stands out to you when you think of those moments?
Yeah, that's a great question to think about.
Have you ever had a moment where the familiar routine suddenly feels just incredibly alien, where a landscape loses its meaning, or even like your own reflection in the mirror suddenly feels dense and strange, almost like you're looking at a complete stranger?
Oh, I think everyone has had that weird mirror moment at least once.
Right. That nausea, that sudden realization of the world's total indifference to your routine, that is the absurd waking up inside you.
And once it wakes up, it forces that ultimate question of suicide that he mentioned at the start.
It really does.
Now, Camus is making a deeply provocative and honestly dangerous argument here. So, to be super clear to everyone listening, we are just mapping out his philosophical architecture today to see how he arrived at his conclusions.
Right, absolutely.
We are definitely not endorsing this as a way to live or making any sort of critique of anyone's personal religious faith. We are strictly looking impartially at the text. But looking at how he constructs this argument, it just shows how incredibly high the stakes were for him.
We are definitely dissecting a very radical piece of philosophy here. So, returning to that architecture you mentioned, once a person realizes the absurd, physical suicide is the most obvious reaction.
It's the fastest way out.
Yeah. It is a confession that life is too much, or that you simply do not understand it. But Camus wholly rejects physical suicide.
He does.
Yes. He argues it's an attempt to settle the absurd by just engulfing it in death. It's a surrender. It's an escape, not an actual solution to the problem.
Okay, but if physical suicide is off the table, how do other thinkers handle that terrifying echo in the cavern? Because human beings have spent thousands of years trying to solve this feeling of emptiness.
This is where Camus turns his critique toward existential philosophers and religious thinkers. People like Søren Kierkegaard, Karl Jaspers, and Leo Chestov.
Heavy hitters.
Yeah, and these thinkers, they all recognized the absurd. They all saw the terrifying, irrational nature of the universe, just like Camus did. But instead of living with it, they took what Camus calls a leap.
A leap of faith.
Yes, and he views this leap incredibly harshly. They took the incomprehensible nature of the universe and basically turned it into a god.
Oh, wow.
They essentially argued, because this world makes no rational sense to us, it must be the work of something divine and beyond our understanding. Camus actually labels this philosophical suicide.
So what does this all mean? He's literally calling faith a form of suicide.
Yeah, he's saying that by taking the leap, you are actively sacrificing your human reason, which he believes is your greatest and most defining tool.
You're just giving up your intellect.
Exactly. You're murdering your intellect.
Yeah.
Instead of facing the harsh reality of the silent universe, you place all your chips on the hope of another life, or some higher power that you cannot possibly comprehend. You escape the tension of the absurd by inventing this comforting illusion.
That is just such a wild paradigm shift. I mean, we usually think of hope as this beautiful, sustaining force that gets us through dark times, right?
That's the standard view, yeah.
But Camus thinks hope is actually a fatal evasion. He's arguing that hoping for a better tomorrow or, hoping for a promised land in an afterlife It actually betrays this life.
Right, because your focus is elsewhere.
Exactly. By constantly hoping for something else, you are actively devaluing the only reality you actually possess right now.
This raises an important question, though. How do you actually live without hope?
Yeah, how is that even possible?
Well, if we can't physically end our lives, and we can't mentally escape the void through hope or philosophical suicide, Camus says the only honest option is constant awareness.
Just staring into it.
Yes. To live is to keep the absurd alive, and you keep it alive by looking right at it without blinking. His solution is built on 3 consequences.
Yeah.
Revolt, freedom, and passion.
Okay, break those down for me.
Well, revolt is this constant defiant confrontation between man and his own obscurity. It's an insistence on living fully in a world you know is meaningless without ever resigning yourself to it.
But if hope is completely off the table, what does a life actually look like when you strip away tomorrow? It sounds deeply depressing on the surface, just staring into a void every day.
It sounds bleak for sure.
Yet Camus somehow spins this into a bizarre kind of liberation, right?
It does. Losing hope in the future paradoxically grants you this massive freedom of action in the present.
How so?
Think about it.
Yeah.
If you aren't bound by eternal rules and you aren't trying to build a resume for the afterlife or sacrifice your current joy for some distant tomorrow, you become truly, completely available to the current moment.
Oh, because the pressure is off?
Exactly. Death is the only absolute reality, and after death, the game is over. So since there is no ultimate cosmic purpose to achieve, you are no longer a slave to a future goal.
Now, Camus doesn't just leave us in the dark with abstract concepts here. He gives us actual examples, like these archetypes of the absurd man who lives this way, and they are fascinating.
They really help ground the philosophy.
First, there's Don Juan, the legendary seducer. But Camus doesn't frame him as this romantic guy looking for true love and failing. He sees him as a man who deliberately seeks a quantity of loves rather than one eternal quality of love.
Right. Don Juan is fully aware his joys are short-lived. He knows every romance will end, and he honestly doesn't care.
He's not heartbroken over it.
Not at all. He isn't melancholy. He just knows his mortal limits and aggressively exhausts his chances of life, living entirely in the passion of the present encounter.
Then there is the actor. I love this one. An actor lives out multiple exceptional destinies. They might be a king, a beggar, a villain, all in 3 hours on 50 square yards of stage boards.
It's a whole lifetime in an evening.
Exactly. They know that theatrical fame is the most ephemeral kind of glory. The applause ends, the curtain falls, the set is struck, it's gone. But the actor applies himself wholeheartedly to being several different people, completely immersing themselves in those fleeting 3 hours.
It's pure presence.
Yeah.
And the third archetype is the conqueror, the person who chooses historical action over eternal contemplation.
Like a revolutionary.
Yeah. They plunge into the seething soul of revolutions and physical struggles. They know that every empire eventually falls and every victory is ultimately temporary, but they fight anyway.
Because they're alive right now.
Exactly. Because this flesh and blood world is their only native land. They absolutely refuse to sit back and just meditate on eternity.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because uniting all these characters implies a very controversial ethics of quantity.
It definitely pushes some buttons.
If I'm understanding this, it sounds like he's saying a 40-year life lived with intense, clear-eyed lucidity is fundamentally better than a 60-year life lived on autopilot.
That is precisely what he's arguing.
But I have to ask, doesn't this just turn into a chaotic free-for-all? If there's no higher meaning and all experiences are technically equal, does Camus mean we should just act like we're in a video game?
Just run around doing whatever?
Yeah. Just treating experiences as points to rack up without any moral compass whatsoever.
It's a really natural conclusion to jump to, but Camus explicitly states that the absurd doesn't authorize all actions. When he says everything is permitted, he clarifies that this doesn't mean nothing is forbidden.
Oh, so there are still boundaries.
Yes. He isn't recommending crime or chaos at all. Rather, the absurd confers an equivalence on the consequences.
Okay, think of it like playing an old-school arcade game right before the arcade closes.
Oh, like this.
You know the machine is going to be unplugged in 5 minutes. You can't save your high score. You aren't playing to unlock some future reward. You are playing entirely for the sheer immediate experience of the current level.
You're just in the zone.
Right. And the actions still have in-game consequences. Like, if you make a bad move, you lose a life, but the stakes are entirely contained within the present moment.
That captures the spirit of it perfectly.
Mm.
You are still responsible for your actions, even if you aren't guilty in a cosmic, eternal sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
But to show just how heavy and potentially devastating these ideas really are, Camus brings in a literary example. He uses Dostoevsky's character Kirillov from the novel The Possessed.
Oh, Kirillov is a wild character.
He really is. Kirillov takes this logic of a godless universe to a terrifying extreme through what he calls logical suicide.
Let's break down the logic of that because it's pretty intense.
Very intense.
Kirillov basically reasons that if God exists, then God dictates the rules of the universe, and humans are entirely subject to that divine will.
Which is standard theology.
Right. But, he says, if God does not exist, then man is essentially a god himself because humanity is completely free to dictate its own existence.
And Kirillov realizes that the only thing keeping humanity from stepping into that total radical freedom is the fear of death.
So how does he beat it?
Well, to prove his total independence, to assert his absolute insubordination against a universe that makes us suffer, he decides he must conquer that fear.
By killing himself.
Yes, he chooses to kill himself, not out of despair or sadness, but as a deliberate, calculated mechanism to show humanity a royal, incredibly difficult path to total freedom. By choosing death entirely on his own terms, he believes he actually becomes a man-god.
It's this dark, twisted, pedagogical exercise. He sacrifices himself just to prove a philosophical point.
It's terrifying logic.
It really is. And Camus points out that Dostoevsky, the author who invented Kirillov, couldn't actually stomach that terrifying freedom himself.
No, Dostoevsky eventually falls back into faith.
Yeah, he has his characters talk about eternal life and resurrection, so Dostoevsky basically took the leap.
He committed philosophical suicide, according to Camus.
Wow. But for our absurd man, the goal is to hold that excruciating tension without leaping.
Which perfectly sets up the final, crowning metaphor of the essay.
Sisyphus.
Yes. Moving from these human examples of absurd living, the seducer, the actor, the conqueror, we arrive at the mythological figure who ties all these concepts of revolt, quantity, and consciousness together.
It is the ultimate mythological punishment. According to the Greek myths, Sisyphus was punished by the gods for a few different things.
He was a bit of a troublemaker.
To put it lightly, he stole their divine secrets. At one point, he literally put death in chains so no human could die.
Which is just a baller move.
Total baller move. And when he did eventually go to the underworld, he tricked his way back to the surface of the earth. And once he felt the sun, the warm stones, and the sea again, he just refused to leave because he loved the physical world way too much.
His intense passion for life, his blatant hatred of death, and his sheer scorn for the gods, all of that earned him the ultimate penalty.
The gods condemn him to roll a massive, heavy rock up a mountain. He strains his whole body, his cheek tight against the stone, his feet wedging it into the dirt.
Just endless physical agony.
Yeah. He pushes through unimaginable pain, and he finally gets it to the summit. He finally gets it to the top, and then he just has to watch it roll all the way back down to the bottom.
Heartbreaking.
And he has to walk down and do it again, forever. It is the absolute definition of futile, hopeless labor.
On the surface, it really sounds like pure, unadulterated torture. But this is where we have to look at the insights from Simon Leah's article in The Collector.
What does Leah say?
Leah makes a really crucial point here. He says many modern readers completely miss Camus's point because they treat this myth purely as a political or economic allegory.
Oh, like a metaphor for capitalism.
Exactly. They try to say, Sisyphus represents the oppressed factory worker and the rock represents capitalism.
Right, reducing it to just a modern labor critique.
But Leah argues that Camus is actually using myth in the ancient, expansive sense. He's using it to express a profound truth about human dignity and the condition of life itself, something that cold logic alone can't quite capture.
So how does Sisyphus capture human dignity? He's just a sweaty guy pushing a rock for eternity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the most important moment in this entire myth is not the physical pushing of the rock. It is the walk back down the mountain.
The descent.
Yes. During that pause, when Sisyphus is walking back down to the plain, he is temporarily free from the physical strain.
It's his break.
Right. For that brief window, his time and his mind are entirely his own. And more importantly, he is fully conscious. He knows the whole terrible extent of his wretched condition.
He's not oblivious.
No. And it is exactly that lucidity, the very awareness that was supposed to be his torture, that actually makes him superior to his rock. A rock is just a rock. It feels nothing. It knows nothing. But Sisyphus is aware.
Wait, because the universe, or the gods in this case, imposed this completely meaningless task on him. They gave him labor, but they failed to give him a purpose. They left that part blank. That means Sisyphus is the one who gets to create it. He is entirely free to assign his own meaning to the task. His rock is his thing. His fate belongs to him.
What's fascinating here is how Camus connects this quiet victory to an ancient Greek play, Sophocles' Oedipus.
How so?
Well, Oedipus has been blinded, exiled, his life is completely ruined by a tragic fate dictated by the gods, and yet, old and blind, being led by his daughter, Oedipus simply says, "I conclude that all is well."
All is well.
Yes. Camus calls that remark sacred. It is the ultimate recipe for the absurd victory.
All is well, even with the rock, even with the blindness. Because it is yours. You own the experience.
Sisyphus realizes that there is no higher destiny. He's the undisputed master of his days. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. As Camus famously concludes, one must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Because the happiness doesn't come from finishing the task. The happiness comes from the rebellion. It comes from owning the rock.
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
So bringing this all together, we've gone on an incredibly wild journey today. We started with the terrifying realization of the absurd, that cold silence of the universe echoing in the canyon.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We explored the temptation to commit philosophical suicide by inventing false hopes and divine escapes, and we arrived at this radical vision of life lived purely for the conscious, vivid experience of the present moment, embodied by Sisyphus smiling as he walks down the hill to his boulder.
It is a philosophy that demands incredible emotional and mental strength. It really requires you to look directly at the void, accept that it is completely empty, and decide to paint your own masterpiece on it anyway, knowing full well the paint will eventually fade.
And that brings us directly back to you listening to this. Why should you care about a 1940s French philosopher's take on an ancient Greek myth?
It's a fair question.
Because every single time you feel stuck in a repetitive loop, whether you are grinding away at a frustrating job, sitting in endless stop-and-go traffic, or just exhausted by the daily never-ending routine of laundry and dishes, you have the power of Sisyphus.
You really do.
You can claim that moment of consciousness as entirely your own. You don't have to pretend the rock isn't heavy, but you can turn that seemingly meaningless grind into an act of quiet, dignified rebellion just by being fully unapologetically present in it.
Which leads to a final, incredibly powerful thought. In an appendix to this essay, Camus writes about the work of Franz Kafka, exploring the idea of ephemeral creation.
Ephemeral creation.
Yeah, he talks about the artist who creates a work of art, who sculpts something beautiful in clay, say, knowing perfectly well that their creation has no future, that it might be completely destroyed tomorrow.
That sounds heartbreaking.
But the absurd creator knows that fundamentally, building for a single day has no more or less importance than building for centuries.
Because it's all temporary in the end. The universe eventually erases everything.
Exactly. So I leave you with this to ponder. If everything you are building right now in your life, your career, your passion projects, your legacy, was guaranteed to vanish tomorrow, how would you change the way you experience the act of building it today?
That is the ultimate question. Think back to that dark canyon. You shout your question into the void and all you get is the echo. But maybe that cold echo isn't a rejection. Maybe it's just the universe handing you a blank canvas, waiting to see what you'll create with the time you have.